Hello, my lovely anatomists. Michele here, and welcome to another one of our reproductive system videos. So remember, we're talking about the 99% of humans that live in this binary of male or female bodies, and what we're looking at in this particular model is the female body anatomy. So taking a look here, we can start again with the gonad. So here we see the ovary, which is the location of where oocytes are being produced. And what we see here is that the ovary is actually separate from the rest of the female reproductive system anatomy. So it's not a continuous track. Instead, what we see is this structure here called the oviduct or fallopian tube actually kind of hugs around the ovary. And so this portion of the oviduct that's sort of like hugging around the ovary, those are called fimbriae. And then we have this enlarged area here called the infundibulum. And then as we get closer to the uterus, we see this part of the oviduct is called the isthmus. This tissue here is our adipose tissue that we're seeing inside what's called the broad ligament. So we're able to see a little bit of that structure here. So we're seeing a little bit of that broad ligament here. So this right here is the uterus. Here's the ovary. Here's the fimbriae. Here's the infundibulum and the isthmus. And so this whole structure is the oviduct or fallopian tube. Now notice we have a ligament that's anchoring the ovary to the uterus, and that's called the ovarian ligament. And again, this is our uterus. If I take a look at this part of the model, here's the uterus. Here's that oviduct or fallopian tube. There's the ovary. And this ligament coming off of the uterus and anchoring into the pelvic cavity is called the round ligament. Okay. Going back to this portion of our model, if we're looking here, we see that the top of the uterus is rounded. We're just seeing half, of course. And so that top would be called the fundus, and the majority of the uterus here would be called the body. And then as we're getting close to where the uterus comes out into the vagina, that area there, that neck area is called the cervix. When we look at the lining of the uterus, we see the innermost lining is the endometrial lining. That's the lining that varies during the uterine cycle. Then we have the myometrium, which is the muscular layer. So that's involved in contractions during labor and delivery or during menses, the sloughing off of that endometrial lining, the part that changes. And then we see this tissue here would be the perimetrium, so that's the outermost layer. When we are looking here at the cervix, we have, of course, our internal os of the cervix, and then this would be the external os of the cervix. So we would think about this whole area right here as being part of the cervix. As we go into the vagina, we have this opening here, which is called the fornix. And then notice that the vagina has rugae, so this is allowing for stretch that would be necessary during either intercourse or labor and delivery. Okay, as we're looking back at the uterus inside the pelvic cavity, notice that there's a space here between the uterus and the rectum. And this space is called the rectouterine pouch, or it can also be called the pouch of Douglas. And so there is a comedian, Hannah Gatsby, I think, who has a whole routine centered around that. And then right here, we have what we call the vesicouterine pouch. So here's a little space in between the uterus and the urinary bladder, right? Here we're seeing part of the vulva, so we're seeing half of that. So the female external genitalia is called the vulva. The vagina is just this birth canal passageway. So we see, as part of the reproductive anatomy, we have the labia majora, labia minora. Right here is the clitoris. And there's a space here between labia minora and labia minora on the other side, left and right. And that space is called the vestibule. When we take a look at it together here, we can see that space, that vestibule would be right here. Shown here in blue, these are going to be glands called the greater vestibular glands and ducts. So these are going to be releasing a lot of secretions during sex and arousal. Right here, this layer of adipose tissue is referred to as the mons pubis. Okay, and so then here with this piece, we're able to see, of course, the external breast. We can see the nipple here and here. And then this dark circle around that nipple is called the areolar. And then we can see when the skin is removed that a big portion of that breast tissue is actually adipose tissue. To finish up the female reproductive body, we're going to take a look at some diagrams. So please stay tuned. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.